Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 4 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we're going to expand our automation to start making some intermediate items, such as pistons and motors. Enjoy! One thing I would like to do is automate the production of bricks here. They go into a few things. Ultimately, though, not that many things. Certainly some things we'll be making, like stone furnaces, and of course walls. The big thing that bricks goes into is laying on the ground for paths. And we definitely want to do that so we can move faster. I know a lot of people don't place any concrete down at all, but I like my concrete so I can move faster. And because we have splitters, we can do this a little easier. Still have a mighty crafting in front of us in order to make this drill. But a lot of the stuff in our inventory is just junk that we could immediately get rid of here. So we're going to want that, and we have a steam assembler as well to actually make the bricks. And we can make use of this pad right here to be our junk pad of getting rid of all of those extra pieces of stone that we have in our inventory. Feels weird being so far away from the items we're making, but I guess we could put this pad closer, but I have the feeling we're just going to move them again later. But I guess for the time being, we can place it a little closer, even though it's just going to get moved quite quickly. Just seems weird to go down there to walk over it. And I suppose this is also a good opportunity to do some things like small steam tanks and one-way valves to try to separate the different uses of steam from each other, so when the factory runs out of steam, everything won't just shut down. It'll just be whatever was using the most steam. So let's build 2 of them for now. And how about 2 one-way valves as well? So let's place it like this, and how about have it pointed up? Of course, the spaghetti is now beginning. Full inventory, that's never fun. Well, we'll take care of this in a second here, because this will be creating stone, which will need to be processed, and we don't really have a lot of space in here to do it. Kind of don't want to go to the right, because that's just where more stuff is going to be. So how about instead we just try to leave the area. But what it means is we can put another chest here and say, please pick up all of the stone, because we don't want it. Of course, when we do this, it picks up the coal that we also wanted to use, but that is what it is. That is why it is a smaller transfer plate, to remind me that I don't necessarily always want to stand on it. Interesting, the plate technically doesn't reach according to this range, but totally it is hitting it. That's odd to me. I guess it can be barely touching and it still counts. Or maybe the range is much further than the plate implies. But nonetheless, it seems like you should try to keep it inside this range so you don't run into any issues. And we probably want to have another panel here somewhere. It does increase our walking speed to 120%, which is totally worth it. As far as the amount of bricks we want to have in our inventory, I guess it depends on how many we would be putting into other things. Certainly they go into things like iron boilers in very large quantities. Stone furnaces to a lesser extent, but like iron boilers, they actually use a lot. So this might fill up our inventory quite substantially. But how about let's request 4 stacks of bricks. So now as we walk over here, we are starting to get our bricks. Of course, another thing we are eventually going to want are some walls, so we might as well get started on that too. But at least for now, we have automated our production of bricks. And since we have, one thing you started off with, might not have been thinking about it, but the game actually gave you a few free bricks here. You just had to remember to pick them up. I'll leave those drills in that chest for now, because they're still quite expensive, so I would like to automate their production first before claiming those. So I still feel like I started from nothing, even though I'm technically grabbing all the resources that they're giving us. Probably want to have more than 1 stack of belts in our inventory. So let's grab a second one. So one thing I was grabbing were these small steam tanks, and we can use these to give a priority to different setups, but we can also use them to just isolate different builds. So if we put this one-way valve here, although I built the one-way valve for water, so that was a mistake, because there are one-way valves specifically for steam. So we plop that in there, and it has the cool arrow graphic on there to tell you which way it's going, and if you use the Shift E, you can control its functionality, where if you do it once, it becomes an overflow valve, and you see the green dot. You can do it again, and it becomes a top-up valve. And one more time, and we're back to one way. And by doing this, it will isolate the steam going into the research. So if we run out of steam at the rest of the factory, at least the labs will continue to research for some amount of time anyway. And we can kind of do the same thing again here for our minibus. So now the minibus will get its own supply of steam. And also, if you find yourself running out of steam, you can figure out what parts of the factory are sucking the most of it up, because that will be the part that has no steam left in its tanks. And at some point, this steam derrick is just not going to be enough, especially now that it's at 49.5 a second instead of 60, but nonetheless, eventually it's just going to be this tiny supply of steam that doesn't really matter in the end. Let's do it one more time, but we don't really need that in there anymore. So there we go, now our little brick making setup is now also isolated from the rest of the factory, and still making bricks. And we could just barely get this in here without it being overlapped, but unfortunately there is not enough room for the steam pipe, because we need to have an inserter here. But if you see, the steam pipes on a steam inserter go opposite to the direction that the inserter actually moves, so you can't do this and have it work, unfortunately. And we could actually crunch this in a little bit here, and let's say we had a tin pallet of walls on the bottom, because at some point we're going to need to start building walls, and ideally it wouldn't be a giant emergency, and we would have a few of them ready to go. Especially since in the beginning you really don't need stone for that much. You definitely need more of it than you do in vanilla, so it is something you'd want to hold on to and collect eventually. But at least in the beginning you don't have a use for it, so you might as well start turning it into walls. And these two machines show you that the walls needs way more bricks than the brick machine can supply, so it's going to take a while to fill that up. But we have some bricks we can place now, and we might as well get started, because we want to create a little road right here, at least when it comes to this transfer plate, which will just help us move faster when we're trying to collect our resources. So our bricks are going to immediately disappear here, but at least for now, we have a little highway that we can run on. Okay, the name of the game here is to just keep making things that we find ourselves handcrafting, so we're making less of them. And certainly, one thing we are spending a great deal of time on is making inserters. And now it's important to note that these inserters are requiring some intermediate items that also have to be manufactured. Requires steam pipes, basic motors, copper pistons. So the question is, do those copper pistons or motors go into other things? And of course they almost certainly do. But we want to know what. Specifically because we are trying to design something where we can just directly insert the resources if possible, rather than having bus belts. So we want to try to put all these machines next to each other to minimize the amount of belts that have to happen for this. And as far as pistons, they do go into basic engines and assemblers, but not too much. The basic motor does also go into a few things, but not stuff we need in huge quantities. And the burner inserter and steam inserter are their own recipes, so they don't go into each other. The long-headed inserter does, but either way, it would start here and go down, and both of them require motors and pistons. And then after we've made the inserters, we can figure out, are there any other things that need the motors and pistons, and then we can go from there. And unfortunately, we still have more handcrafting in front of us, although having the steam inserters will make this faster, because that is one of the components into the assembler. So once you start making some items, you'll find it start to speed up quite a bit. Okay, we've got an assembler here. So let's put it in there. It needs to be the big one, because although the piston is on the basic components list, it cannot be made in the small assembler. It has to be made in the big one because it has multiple input components. I believe the small assembler can only do items that have one input and one output due to its size. So we can check this here, where one piston assembling machine makes 0.313 pistons. We would need double that. So it kind of shows you that right out the gate, we're actually going to need quite a bit of this. And even if we did direct insertion, it would have to be direct inserted on both sides. And we want to try to keep up with the machines if possible. So we're going to need to have at least 2 piston machines, if not more. Because we are going to be relying on this minibus for some time, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. And we are running low on copper, so we might as well design our little setup here to pull ingots away. And I don't know if you can put filters on these early inserters. It doesn't seem like you can. So because of that, we probably want to pull both of them and then have another one of these splitters, splitting them apart to their individual resources, which then can be pulled off as required. Alright, this one is the simpler of the two. Just requires copper plates and rods, but it requires twice as many plates as rods, so I'm guessing that means we're going to need 2 plate machines and 1 rod machine, so let's check them all. And that seems to be the case, but the machine is so slow that we actually can get by on just 1 machine for each side. Let's set this up in a way to be nice and copyable. So we'll get them all to the side here, and they need to have 1 copper belt going down the middle. And they would put their resources on some sort of belt down here. What exactly, we're not sure. But we would need to build 2 of these if we want to have a nice throughput, and we probably do. And it is much smaller than everything else. So number 1, and let's squish them in a little bit. I don't think it'll matter too much. And we're going to have an output. So we'll figure this one out now. It does require 3 items, so if we can't do this with 1 layer deep of assemblers, then we're going to need to do it 2 layers. Kind of want to get those pellets out of my inventory. So if I make 1 more shotgun shell, it has now been removed. And we can also gain another slot by putting this deconstruction planner into the game blueprints library. Okay, select everything and see if it's fast enough. The rods and the gears are, but we need twice as many of the plate machines. And I guess we don't need to be holding on to iron ore or tin ore anymore to make our menu a little cleaner. So if we put 1 more there, now making plates. Although I might have made the error where I selected everything, because if we just do this alone, it is actually enough plates. It becomes not enough plates when you include the gear machine. But that is actually enough, which means we only need to have the plate machines right here. So it's fast enough for that, fast enough for that, and that's fast enough. So that's kind of, it's a little weird how you do it. You need to understand how rate calculator works, but you can figure this out a lot faster than you can in Hellmod if you just kind of think about what you're trying to do here. And we can make this really symmetrical by putting all of the plate machines up there. And now we have a build for the motors. The only question is how long is it going to take to handcraft everything? But at least we have something that works. Or at least it should work. We will find out if it works in a second. So we plop this in there and try to line it up. It is bigger than the other setup by a little bit. And I kind of am thinking I would like to have these machines spaced by 1 anyway. Even if it's not strictly required. Just in case it ends up mattering. It's a good thing we have robots. So our little belt will continue here. Let's do this with the belt to put it on the inside, which means now these inserters will be on the correct side. And that will give us a belt with motors and pistons on it. All this handcrafting definitely makes you appreciate automation more, for sure. It really strengthens it. Because in vanilla you can kind of get away with some amount of handcrafting, but man, with IR3 you really feel it when you're doing any amount of handcrafting, so it's definitely pushing you towards the direction of not doing that anymore. Well, we can save ourselves some amount of handcrafting time, because although this isn't complete as far as making the motors is concerned, the side that it's making the pistons is more or less complete, and a lot of pistons are going into these other items. So if we start making pistons and grab a few, that should save us some time. And there they go. It's not fully hooked up yet, but it's enough to start grabbing pistons. We'll worry about making the logistics request later, but at least for now we can just kind of run down here and grab a few. We still need the 10 of them, so we'll put them back in. But now, the crafting time is a lot shorter because it's not including the pistons anymore. Because we're grabbing a few from the belt here. And of course, we will eventually want to make a request for them, so we might as well add that onto our list now. Let's remove these for the assemblers, because assemblers definitely use lots of pistons. So now that we have that automated, this will go faster. It's definitely satisfying to hear all of the steam noises and the whirs and clunks of all of this operating. It feels very mechanical, for sure, both in how it was set up and just how it looks. But it also feels very satisfying to have it all running. Making these still takes a long time, but at least we're not making the pistons anymore. Definitely the big time sink when it comes to these larger things like steam assemblers and burner drills. It's the large copper frame, because the large copper frame takes 98 seconds all by itself, which is half of the total time that goes into making, say, a mining drill, just because of the sheer quantity of parts that have to go into it. Let's unhook this from there, so inserters aren't dropping items on the ground. And then when we place this and connect it, hopefully everything's in there, and we should start seeing motors. Looks like I didn't do the rods quite right. They are just directly inserted, so it's actually a pretty easy fix. But we have to be careful where we put it, because this inserter here does need to receive its steam, but so does everything else here, so let's just put the long-handed in there and connect these pipes together to make sure everything works. But there we go. That should be all connected now. Operating at full speed, making those motors. And let's try to keep all of these plates in line, so we'll just leave it right here and place it right there for now. And actually, since nothing else is going here, we can make this a little easier to understand by putting it there, because now we'll be able to automate the delivery of both motors and pistons, which will dramatically cut down the construction time of the rest of the items that we need. And there we go. So what do we still need? Just 2 assemblers. I say just, but even though we have that automated, the crafting queue is still pretty long to make one of these. But at least it's shorter than it was before. How are we doing on steam? Because I'm noticing that the steam number here in these pipes are actually going down. And that is true, because we're only making 43.5 steam now, and that is technically not enough to fill up these pipes. But I don't feel the need to build a boiler setup quite yet. I feel like we should kind of wait until it's actually falling behind first, because these machines are working hard right now to create a buffer, and then when they have, they will no longer be working hard. So let's continue the paving of the factory here. At least this line right here, we want to be nice and fast, so as we are walking by, we can quickly reload with materials. Well, the copper's gone, so I guess we might as well just hook everything up anyway. It's not going to make too much of a difference, because we are now down to our speed of making copper, which is not very fast. Well, I guess we'll just have to see that if we can make the next build and the copper still hasn't caught up, then I suppose that means we need a lot more of it. And in fact, since we're thinking about that, that is probably something that we should try to pursue here, because very early on, you get the ability to increase the yield on your copper. First, we're going to have to research the charcoal kiln, and that is very similar to a stone furnace. And what it allows you to do is to put wood in and you get charcoal on the way out. And important to note is that wood has 2 megajoules to start with. However, when you do this, charcoal will have 4 megajoules. So you will double the amount of energy that you have in wood. And right now, burning wood products is not a very good idea because we can't automate wood, but later on when we can, this is a good way of dumping wood. But for now, we probably won't bother. But nonetheless, it does double the fuel value of wood. And not only that, it doesn't require any energy. And not only that, but it makes the fuel pollution value of charcoal 50%. And that's one thing we kind of haven't covered yet. Guess we'll start this research. Different fuels can have different pollution levels. Right now, coal is just normal pollution, so it is 100%. But anything that burns solid fuel, if we put charcoal in it, it would mean that the amount of pollution that that machine makes would be cut in half. So using high quality fuels is definitely important. And once we have that, we'll be able to do the steam crusher, which is going to be another expensive machine because it requires the large copper frames. However, it allows us to crush things. We can crush stone down into gravel, and then crush gravel down into silica, which we will need later. You can crush regular coal into crushed coal. The fuel value is the same, however, it does cut the pollution down to 75%. So once you're able to do this, you should, just to cut down the pollution in the factory. It allows you to crush down wood into wood chips. However, this does not increase the fuel value of the wood in any way. It's just something that you can do. And also it allows you to put the wood chips into the kiln. However, that does not increase the yield of the wood either, because you still had to put the same amount of wood in to get the same amount of charcoal in the end. However, it does give you a use for these wood chips, which come from other sources. It gives us our first recipe that can actually process the rubber wood, where we put the rubber wood in and we get some amount of rubber and also those wood chips. So that's why we need to be able to process wood chips, because we'll get some as a result of rubber. And the main thing we're doing all this for is so we can crush copper and tin ore into crushed ore, and that will give us a new recipe that now, instead of one ore becoming one ingot, one ore will become either 1 or 2 ingots. So in other words, it's a 50% bonus to production, and now it's at 150%, and that applies to tin as well. So that will certainly help, but also it does something else where you notice that not only can the fuel have a pollution value, but so too can the recipe, where smelting copper from crushed copper is a 100% pollution recipe. But if you look at the recipe that we're using now, it's actually 125% pollution. So besides the fact that we're getting more copper, we're also going to make less pollution for the same amount of copper. And if you combine that with adding charcoal, if you so happen to have it, that will make the pollution values for smelting significantly lower. Nonetheless, we might as well get that researched, and because we have so much science on hand, and really we don't have enough labs for the amount of science we can make, that will change soon enough. But for now, that is something that the factory can work on here. Okay, we're just about done. So we have automated the motors and the pistons, and we were doing that. Also, we could make some inserters. But there is one other consideration here, that we actually need steam pipes to go into the inserters, and of course we need to automate steam pipes as well. The question is, how much stuff do these pipes go into? They actually go into a reasonable amount of things. However, making the pipes themselves is actually quite straightforward, where it's probably not worth putting it on a belt like this, because a lot of these things we're not actually going to be manufacturing automatically. Certainly we're going to want to make things like steam inserters automatically, but are we going to want to make loaders automatically? Probably not, because we just don't need that many. Same with drills. Lamps we probably would, but like the heavy roller vehicle, we wouldn't automate. Steam laboratories, we wouldn't automate. Steam derrick, we wouldn't. Steam crusher, yes, but the steam crusher is kind of a big machine and we wouldn't want to automate it anyway, even if we could. We're really only looking to automate small machines right now. And there's really not that much that we would have to make. So I feel like putting pipes on a little belt here is probably overkill, because we want to minimize the amount of belts that we have down here, because it's going to run out of space real fast. We just want to make the items quickly, use them quickly, and then stop having the belt there so there's room for something else later on. So that tells me that we should just make the steam pipes right next to these inserters so they can be just direct inserted. So now, even though our goal is inserters, let's make something else. How about let's make some pipes here. We don't really need water pipes yet, but we're definitely going to want to do the underground pipes. It's probably a little overkill to automate both regular undergrounds and the short ones, but in this situation, I'm thinking we should just make the regular pipes and not worry too much about it. And even though we've automated things, they still take a while, unfortunately, because there's more to automate still. And definitely that copper is not going very fast. So we're going to want to make a faster build of that. Of course, we're also doing research too, which is consuming a significant amount on its own. Okay, we're going to have one machine here. Let's check the numbers. That the machine that's making the pipes is going to do it at 1.25, and the one making the undergrounds is going to need them much, much faster than that. So how about we have this underground machine flanked by 2 pipe machines. One of them can go just straight into this machine. The other one could also go straight into the machine, but then also be put into the steam inserter as well. Because pipes is something you kind of need a lot of when you need a lot of them, and you really need to pump the pipes in. So it kind of makes sense to have this flanked by 2 pipe machines. Let's calculate for the regular pipes first, because the underground pipe machine just needs the pipes, where this one requires copper plates and also something new, copper rivets. First, let's check the numbers. Let's do copper plate and copper rivet and check everything, and that is plenty fast. And rivets come from rods, and the rods come from ingots. So it would be something quite simple like this, and research is done already. So we'll get into that in a bit. But that's all we would need, and because making the undergrounds does not require anything special, we can just put the machine right here, which means the other pipe machine would go on the other side. Let's have these going to the side with the pallets in the middle to pick up the items, and let's put another one on the side here with another pallet to put the undergrounds, and it should be something like this. So we need to figure out a spot for it, but unfortunately our little setup here is in the way, and I kind of don't want it to be, because I would like to smash these in as close as we can get them, because we need to get that in there. Of course, now we have a huge amount of pistons in our inventory. Well, this is definitely going a lot faster as far as handcrafting is concerned. And it looks like if we wait a little bit longer, essentially the copper will have caught up. Let's get the requests ready to go. We want steam pipes and the regular undergrounds. And we should be ready to go. We're just waiting on the copper to actually build up a little bit. So while that is happening, we can plan for our new build, making more copper. And this is definitely a hell mod thing. So we'll do a new line again. This time we need to calculate for making ingots from crushed ore. And we now have a number that we want to make, and that is 7.5, or half of the belt. To do so is going to require the 24 stone furnaces. We are fine using regular coal, although we will be crushing coal, so we might as well assume that it's going to be crushed coal. The only thing it changes is the pollution, and you can see that if we are using regular coal, the pollution will be 1.21, and if we used crushed coal, it's 1.91, so it definitely helps. We need to make the crushed copper in the steam crusher. You can see it uses like half of our steam output, so we might be running low on steam soon. Also, it's important to note, and I suppose we might as well start building one now. I haven't pointed this out, but if you look at these assembling machines, notice how they don't make any pollution. The little ones don't make pollution, the big ones don't make pollution. Only very specific machines in IR3 make pollution. Certainly stone furnaces make them, mining drills make them, boilers make them, but other than that, you kind of need to pay attention, especially when it comes to placing modules, because a great deal of machines in IR3 make no pollution at all. And you definitely see that here, where the crusher stage of this makes none. And this is probably the part that's not going to link correctly. It's kind of linking. This is going to run on crushed coal as well. We might as well set that to be the default for both of these, so we don't have to change it again later. And that shows you where 5 copper ore goes in, and we get 7.5 ingots on the way out. And now let's change this number a little bit. Is it going to give us the decimals? It is. So these are perfect numbers, where now it is a 4 to 8 to 24 ratio. But we probably don't want to do direct insertion, because we do need to get coal into this stone furnace, but we don't need to get coal into the steam crusher. And in fact, there is no burner version of the steam crusher either, so we're kind of stuck with it. And it looks like these are kind of catching up a little bit, so as long as that is happening, we should keep this going. So we'll give this a test. Right now, the underground machine is monopolizing the pipes, but it's absolutely working, and now we are getting pipes. And since it's going to require an incredible amount of time to make all the machines for this build, 4 burner drills and 8 steam crushers, that's a long time, considering each one of those takes a couple of minutes, although it'll take less than a couple of minutes now that we are automating certain components, but nonetheless, I kind of want to push that off as long as we can, I would rather continue to work on this automation, but clearly if we run out of ingots, then no automating will occur because there are no resources. But for now, since the resources have made it back and eventually it's going to get through that, we probably should take this the next step. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.